Okay, so like you hear all the time about these like really powerful countries, right? These nations that everyone pays attention to. And if you want to understand like what's happening in the world, well, you got to understand them. So today we're diving deep, deep into two of those giants, India and the US. And we've got like a whole stack of sources here from, like history books to current news and reports. Our mission, if you will, is to like really get under the hood, right? See what makes these two tick, what makes them different, and maybe find some surprising similarities along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Comparing India and the U.S., it's like you're looking at two completely different recipes for, becoming a global powerhouse.
Yeah.
It's not just about the numbers, right? It's about getting a feel for like the forces that have shaped their societies and how they operate on the world stage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're talking about two nations that are super complex. Like, where do you even start? I mean, for me, I think like if you want to understand where they are now, you got to look back, right? Back to the beginning. Let's dig into their history a bit.
Right. And have a good foundation.
Yeah.
Right. And India's history is like, wow, it's amazing how long it goes back, like 5,000 years. Think about that. You have like all these huge empires, the Mauryas, the Guptas, and the Mughal era, and then, of course, British rule. It's a lot to unpack.
And then that moment, 1947, independence, finally. And not just any independence, right? They got there through Gandhi's, his whole philosophy of nonviolence. That must have been, like, so powerful for the nation's identity, right? It wasn't just a political thing.
Oh, totally. It, like, solidified this dedication to self-determination and democracy, which is, like, even more impressive when you consider just how diverse India is. It's a really powerful story that still resonates with them today.
Now, switching gears to the U.S., it feels like fast forwarding through time, 1776, boom, a nation is born. And in like just over 2 centuries, it becomes a superpower. That's crazy.
What's interesting is that it was those like core ideals from the start, the democracy, the focus on individual freedom, and of course, capitalism. They like acted as this engine for growth and this culture of innovation, like the American dream, right? You can achieve anything if you work hard enough. It's ingrained in their DNA.
Yeah, you can really see how these like totally different historical journeys have shaped their personalities as nations, right? Okay, so we've laid the groundwork, but what about daily life? What about the fabric of their societies, their cultures?
This is where things get really interesting, right? India, it's like this crazy kaleidoscope of culture.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got tons of traditions, festivals, customs, plus like over 2,000 ethnic groups and something like 1,600 languages. You see this in their national festivals, Diwali, Holi, Eid, even Christmas. Each one is like so unique, but celebrated across the whole country. It's that unity and diversity thing you always hear about.
Unity and diversity, yeah, that's India in a nutshell. The U.S., though, it's often called the melting pot, right?
Right. And that whole melting pot idea, it shows how much immigration has shaped American culture. Individualism, expressing yourself, personal freedom. It's all about like the individual journey and finding yourself. Yeah.
And that leads to some like pretty big differences in how their societies are structured, right? Like think about family, for example.
Oh, yeah. Huge difference. In India, family is like everything. They have this like collective approach to well-being, everyone supporting each other, multiple generations living together, often even after the kids get married. The U.S., though, it's more about independence. You're expected to like leave the nest pretty early and build your own life on your own terms.
And that extends to big things like marriage too, right? Like arranged marriages are still common in India, whereas in the U.S., it's all about like dating and finding your own partner.
Exactly. These aren't just like superficial differences. They reflect, deep cultural values and expectations about relationships, family roles, and like where the individual fits in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, so culturally, they're on different planets. What about their economies, though? How do India and the U.S. stack up in the financial world?
Both are definitely major players, global heavyweights, but they're like structures and how they're growing, that's quite different. India's economy is this fascinating mix of like traditional industries, a growing manufacturing sector, and then of course this booming tech scene, the startup scene there, especially in Bangalore, there's Silicon Valley. It's pretty amazing.
But there's some big challenges too, right? You hear about the unemployment, the income inequality. It's tough.
Yeah, those are definitely serious hurdles for India, especially as their economy modernizes. The U.S., on the other hand, has been like the big dog economically for a while. really strong in tech, finance, healthcare, you name it. Silicon Valley is still like the epicenter of the tech world.
And the US dollar, I mean, it's the world's currency, right? And the stock market, it influences everything.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Those are like the cornerstones of how the global economy works right now.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting to compare, like the average income in the U.S. is way higher, but the cost of living in India is way lower. It makes you think about what economic well-being really means.
Yeah, it's not always about the raw numbers, is it? Now, you mentioned tech. Let's talk more about that and innovation. Who's really shaping the future in these areas?
Well, the U.S. has been leading the charge for a while now, right? You've got Tesla revolutionizing cars and energy, SpaceX making space travel like a reality, Meta and all this VR and metaverse stuff. And then there's AI, blockchain, biotech. The U.S. is like the breeding ground for these new technologies.
But India's no slouch when it comes to tech, are they? I mean, their IT workforce is massive.
Oh, yeah. India is like a tech powerhouse in its own right, especially in IT services and software development. They have so many talented engineers and programmers. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it's not just IT. Their space program, ISRO, has done some amazing things like missions to Mars and the moon, and they do it all on shoestring budget compared to like NASA.
It's like they achieved these huge goals with like way fewer resources. It's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, it shows a lot of resourcefulness and ingenuity, that's for sure.
So both are big players in tech, but with different strengths. Now, let's switch to how these countries are run. Their politics and governance, both are democracies, but they operate in totally different ways, don't they?
Huge difference. India, it's the world's largest democracy, which is pretty mind-blowing. They have a parliamentary system, tons of political parties, and often these like really complex coalition governments. It can be quite messy.
The U.S., though, it's presidential, right? And it's dominated by two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And you can't forget like all the debates, the lobbying, the elections. It's a whole spectacle.
Oh, what's cool is that despite all the structural differences, both countries are built on democratic values. And they both have a huge influence on global politics, even if their priorities and, perspectives on certain issues don't always align.
Yeah, same basic values, but different ways of putting them into practice. Now, let's get down to like the everyday experience, right? Lifestyle and education. How's it like living in these countries?
The U.S. education system is known for like encouraging creativity, research, innovation, that kind of thing. And of course, you have these world-famous universities, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, the list goes on.
But that comes at a cost, right? College is expensive. Student debt is a huge problem.
Definitely a major barrier for a lot of people. In India, it's different. Their entrance exams are notoriously tough, like the IIT-JEE and the UPSC, and education is generally more affordable. But there's been criticism about, like, the focus on memorization, not enough practical skills.
But things are changing there, right? They're moving towards more skill-based education, and online learning is becoming a big thing.
Absolutely. They realize they need to, equip their young people with the right skills for the modern economy. When it comes to work culture, there are some big differences, too. The U.S. is all about work-life balance, flexible schedules, working remotely, and being efficient during work hours.
In India, though, people tend to work longer hours, right?
Traditionally, yes. But as the world becomes more interconnected, we're seeing some, blending of those norms. India is starting to care more about work-life balance, and maybe the U.S. is realizing the value of focused work time,
It's interesting how those things start to influence each other. Okay, enough serious stuff. Let's talk about the fun part. Pop culture, food, entertainment. What makes these countries, tick when it comes to having a good time?
Now we're talking. This is where you really see their personalities shine. Bollywood, that's India's Hollywood, but it's on steroids. They churn out more movies than anyone, and their stars, like Shah Rukh Khan, are global icons.
Bollywood is a force of nature, no doubt. But you can't deny Hollywood's influence, right? It's everywhere.
True. Hollywood pretty much sets the standard for global entertainment. And then there's the food. Indian cuisine, oh man, it's all about spices, regional flavors, street food. It's an experience.
And the U.S., yeah, we've got our burgers and fries and BBQ, but we're also this giant melting pot of culinary traditions. You can find authentic food from almost every country in the world in any big U.S. city.
So true. Our diversity really shines through in the food scene. And finally, sports. Cricket in India is like a religion, right?
Oh, yeah. It's crazy how much they love cricket. In the U.S., it's more about football, basketball, baseball, each with their own, huge fan bases.
So even in how they play, you see these distinct cultural preferences.
Okay, we've covered a lot, but as we wrap up this deep dive, what are like the big takeaways when comparing India and the US?
Well, I think it's clear that both have their own unique strengths, right? India's economy is growing like crazy. Their democracy is thriving despite all their diversity. It's impressive. And the U.S., well, it's still leading the way in innovation and has this huge global influence.
And it seems to me that instead of seeing each other as competitors, they could actually learn a lot from each other, right?
Totally. They both have their own historical baggage and have developed their own ways of doing things. By understanding those differences, they can help each other, you know?
So here's a final thought to ponder. As India and the U.S. keep moving forward and their relationship keeps evolving, what do you think are the most important areas where they could learn from each other? To navigate this crazy 21st century world. It's something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into India and the United States.
It's been a fascinating journey, for sure. Until next time.